So far, my claim to fame is making short, vertical videos for the amusement of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and occasionally millions of people on the internet. And oftentimes, I always get asked how to make said videos. So today, I'd like to show off the process for making a short, starting from its conception as an idea to the finished product that you see on your phone. I know it probably seems like a straightforward process, but I hope this video gives some insight into the creativeness and tediousness that goes into crafting the perfect Miles Large short. Hey guys, post-edit Miles here. I just wanted to say, obviously in this video, I'm going to be talking a lot about the covers that I make, but I know some people are curious about the band skits that I make or the meme type videos, whatever you want to call them. Luckily for you, the process is exactly the same. The only difference is I don't actually have to record a guitar because I'm just going to be inserting the song itself into the video. So I hope that clears things up. Generally, when it comes to creating a cover, the first process that comes to mind that people might not immediately think of is the decision process. I usually end up figuring out what I want to cover by browsing through my music library, but sometimes a song or album will pop into my head and I'll feel motivated to want to play it in a video. I'm kind of picky when it comes to what I like to cover. Most of the time I have to be familiar with it in some capacity. When I started to do these covers, I exclusively focused on things I already knew how to play because it allowed me to focus on output without having to constantly learn new songs all the time. Of course, there's nothing wrong with learning a new song, but I wanted to focus on posting consistently every day, so I had to find the right balance at first. I would say of all the covers that I've made up to this point, roughly 85% of them I already knew how to play even before I started posting last year in May. Once I figure out what I want to do, I go into Logic and set up the project files and import the tracks that I'm going to cover. My backing tracks aren't created by me, but instead are just the actual recordings themselves. I usually end up EQing out the guitar so I can drop in my own. It would be an ordeal and a half to actually create a backing track for every single song that I covered, so for laziness' sake, I do it this way. Obviously, once in a while I run into some copyright issues, but generally, if you keep it under a minute long, platforms like TikTok and YouTube will allow you to post the copyrighted songs without issue. I have got comments in the past that complain that I cut the songs off too early or at the best part, and if you were one of those people that left a comment like that, this is basically why. The last step in the preparation process is to make sure my gear is in order, which mainly entails rearranging my pedal board to include a pedal that I might need, say my wah pedal or the Super Fuzz, and just making sure my guitars sound good and in tune with no problems. If my strings sound super flat, I might change them, but I have gone for long periods of time without a string change for these videos. The first step in the recording process, naturally, is picking what shirt I want to wear for the video. I like to wear things that fit in with what I'm covering, especially if I already have a shirt of the band. After all, it would make little sense to record a Black Sabbath cover wearing a Joker from Persona 5 outfit. This is just a random aside, but in the future, if I ever have a more proper studio that isn't just like half a room, then I like to have a clothing rack off to the side with all my outfits and shirts that I use for my videos, kind of like they do for a theater. Once I have the outfit arranged for the video, I start by adjusting the lights. I use these two big softbox lights with white diffusers on both. I must admit that I'm not really the greatest at deciding where the lights should go in the light placement, but my ultimate goal always is to make sure that there's no light reflections or glare in my glasses because it causes problems when I have to edit it later on. I could easily just not wear glasses because I can actually see fine without them, but I've made them an integral part of my brand at this point, so they shall remain glued to my face. Next, and probably the most tedious task of all, is setting up the pedals and the amp sim to match the tones that I want for the video. I've said this before, but in most cases I usually run my pedals directly into an interface which is plugged into my computer running Logic Pro X. The amp sim that I use for 99% of the time would be the Britten Clean Vox type preset. It's always set clean, and the reason why I picked this preset is because my main amp is an actual Vox AC15. It's not really in any way the same as the real thing, but I've gotten a lot of experience with using it over the years, so it's what I use. I don't generally play with the EQ too much. Most of the time I usually adjust my pedals for that. However, I will swap around the microphone sometimes just to get closer to the right tone. I know there's probably some music snob that's down there in the comments that's typed up a big paragraph about why this setup is bad and here are the reasons why. I must admit, it's not really my ideal setup personally. I think an actual amp sounds miles better, but obviously miking up my actual AC15 would just be really loud and inconvenient. What I would like to do in the future is get an amp in the box type pedal that would either plug into my interface directly or my computer. The one I'm interested in is the Universal Audio Ruby because, you guessed it, it's a recreation of a Vox style amp. Universal Audio, if you're watching this, call me. After all these things are finished, it's time to record. I don't have an actual camera, but rather I use the front-facing camera on my phone. It is convenient to record this way because I can actively monitor what I'm doing as I do it. I would like an actual camera in the future, but of course things cost money. Canon, Nikon, Sony, or Fujifilm. If you're watching this, call me. Generally, I like to record more than just a single video at a time, so I'll have a line of projects to go through one at a time, like an assembly line, stopping only to adjust the pedals or amp sim for the next set of tones, or if I make a mistake. This might go without saying, but I try to be a bit more animated in my videos and get into the groove and look like I'm actually enjoying what I'm playing. Of course, I always enjoy what I play, but sometimes I get too focused on perfecting the part, so I have to remind myself to be animated for the camera. Once I finish recording, I take a break. I never usually like to record and edit all in the same day just because editing is essentially a second shift. The first step of editing is to mix the audio in Logic, both to get the right volume balance and also just to add any other effects or EQ to help the guitar sit in the mix. Ideally, if I did my job properly earlier in setting up the amp sims and the pedals, the only thing I'll have to adjust is the volume for the guitar track. Next up, I go into Final Cut Pro, I create a new project, and I start with the editing process. I usually start by dragging the raw video in the timeline and then syncing it up with the audio. If it's for one of my favorite riffs type videos, then I have to do it 4 times. I've noticed in the past that I usually end up recording more than I ever need in most cases, but I'd rather have to record more than I ever need than not have enough and have to go re-record it. During this process, I like to trim the video exactly how I want it before moving on to the next step, which is dealing with the green screen. The green screen editing process can very well boil down to how well the lights were set up. If they were set up well, I usually just highlight a big chunk of the green area to key it out and then just drop in whatever picture or video that I want behind the video of myself. You can tell when they weren't set up well when you get weird artifacts like holes where the light reflects off of my glasses. This is definitely unwanted and kind of creepy looking, but luckily there is a fill holes feature of the green screen keyer. Sometimes, despite this handy feature, it is still possible not to completely fix this. When it does happen on occasion, I just kind of let it slide and post it anyway, seeing as these videos aren't super professional, and since it only usually appears for a frame or two, I doubt people really ever notice that much. That said, going forward, you're probably going to notice it now. As an aside, I really should just figure out the best light placement and just mark it on the floor one of these days. The last step of the editing process is just to boost the audio. Not loudness wars levels of boosting, but enough so you don't have to crank the volume up super high to hear everything. And that, my friends, is the whole editing process. We're unfortunately not really done with the editing process. Next we have to upload, and that usually means it's phase 2 of the editing process since I have to add all the texts and the titles to the video if it calls for it. My app of choice is the TikTok editor, mainly just because it's the best one. It's easy to use, it's intuitive, and most important of all, things just snap into place. Normally it's a one and done type process and I can just save the finished product to my phone, sans watermark, so I can upload it to other platforms. However, as you YouTube viewers may have noticed, there's a lot of stuff on the screen when you watch shorts sometimes. As a result, I'm pretty mindful of where I place text on the screen, sometimes opting to place text in a way that's good for the YouTube Shorts feed, saving that copy of the video, and then re-editing the text for TikTok and Instagram. It's an ordeal and a half, but I want to make sure the content is well received regardless of what platform it's on. Next, we pick hashtags. Back when I started out, I figured the more hashtags the better. Nowadays, I try to be a lot more strategic about them, picking ones that directly correlate to the video at hand, and somewhat shying away from the generic ones like FYP, music, and shorts. There's not really a rhyme or reason to the thought process on how I pick what I do. I think ultimately it matters more for TikTok and to an extent YouTube, but I try not to rely on the hashtags too much. I obviously focus on making the video enjoyable first and foremost. If it flops, and that's that. But I will re-upload certain videos that I thought might do better after a long period of time, but that's just a whole other discussion for another time. The last step in this whole process is to schedule the uploads. Unfortunately, YouTube is really the only platform I do this with. To this day, I still upload each TikTok and Instagram reel manually. I used to schedule the Instagram ones until one day they just randomly stopped working, so I haven't trusted it since. TikTok does have a way to do it via desktop, however, because I already need to put the video on my phone to add text and titles, I haven't really bothered to go back and try that. It's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. It's part of my routine at this point. And that is how you make a miles large short. Please leave suggestions and thoughts about this video or things you would like to see in future videos in the comments below. As always, you can support me on Ko-Fi as well as check out some of my original music on Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music, and right here on YouTube. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.